the camera for Mr. Silva,
And then he can talk and the people at home.
they can hear, yep.
Excellent.
Hear him here. Just verify that they can hear you when you speak.
Can anyone hear me?
Okay, hold on. Let me see.
Yes, I can hear you.
I can hear you as well.
Okay, good evening, Richard De Silva, Connecticut Avenue. First, I would like to apologize to Superintendent Brummett. I said some things about you at the last time I was here. And I apologize. After following the Board of Ed a little bit more, I see because you sit at the end of that table, you take a lot of blame for the things that they do and say. So I apologize. And I will apologize to the chairman when I see him. First things first, the new policy about complaints. The Board of Ed was elected to deal with some of these complaints, and it's either you're tired of doing your duty because you're opting to pawn it off onto the superintendent, giving her way more work to do. If you are tired of doing your duties, maybe you should not be doing your duties. Maybe you should step down, because that is your job. That is why people elected you. They elected you to do those duties. The next thing is anonymous reporting. You want to do away with anonymous reporting. One of the primary reasons I show up here is because parents ask me to show up. They feel when they publicly complain and their name is known, the Board of Ed goes after them, their reputation, and their children. By implementing a no anonymous policy, you're basically confirming their thoughts and belief. They can't hide. And if they report anything, you will stomp out any dissent because you will know their names, who they are, what they do. Anonymous policies, anonymous reporting policies also help students that have to report things, especially things that happen to their teachers because of their teachers or whoever else. How can they have any of their grievances heard if the people that are responsible for passing it up are the ones that are causing the grievances? So those are the two main things. One, parents feel attacked. That's why you need to not implement an anonymous policy. They cannot complain if they feel attacked. You implement a no anonymous grievance policies, you are telling them exactly what they already believe. We will stomp out your dissent when we know your name. That's exactly what you're telling them. And there's nothing you can say that would convince them otherwise. Secondly, going back to the first point, we elected you to do a job, and that job is not to vote to pawn it off onto the superintendent. You have your own duties, she has her own duties. Do your duties well or leave your positions. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. All right, I think there's Anastasia for public participation.
Ms. Yalp, if you would like to begin public participation.
Yes, of course. Anastasia Yap, 138 8th Street, Newington, Connecticut. And I'm calling in regards to one of the revisions of the policies. In section 9132, it says the chairperson of each committee shall call a meeting, can call a meeting. The chairperson shall work with the superintendent or designee and board chair to schedule, revise, or cancel meetings, as well as the setting of the meeting agenda. Unfortunately, it's been my personal experience that it's very hard to get things on the agenda. We've been on the board for a year. I think taking this power away from elected officials is absolutely uncalled for. I haven't had any issues with working with the superintendent, scheduling a meeting, and I don't feel like it should be a policy set forth. I was, an elected official. This is my duty as like the chairman of finance, and I don't feel like this should be a policy set in stone. As we know, over the years, the chairs have changed, the board chairs will change, and I feel like depending on who's in power, not saying the people now, make sure I'm making that clear, it can be used as an abuse of power. I think elected officials have that ability. It's always been there. And I'd like to know the reasoning behind changing this. I know we've had some issues in regards to some board members in the past or in general with canceling meetings, but I don't think all elected officials should be penalized for this. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have another public
Richard?
participation. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it's easier because my computer is not.
Mr. Lavier, if you would like to begin your public participation?
Yes, good evening. Yeah, I'm not sure why my camera's sideways, but I have read over one of the proposed policies that's going for discussion with regard to handling of parent or voter complaints. And I think that that is not a good position for the policy subcommittee to be recommending such a thing. As was previously stated by a member of the public, that we were elected to handle voter concerns as well as make policy changes. The proposed policy says that we're going to refer everything to the superintendent. Well, our purpose here is to help the people, help the voters, help the students. And if we're just taking the position of, oh, well, this new policy, go to the superintendent, nothing we can do about it, that's a pretty weak position to take. Secondly, as to the policy with regard, as Ms. Yupp said, with regard to the canceling of meetings, as it stands right now, any committee chairperson has the authority to cancel and call a meeting under certain provisions. This provision is something that again takes power away from members of the board, and specifically chairs of subcommittees, and basically requires permission from either the chairman of the Board of Education and or the superintendent in order to carry out their duties. These policies are essentially handing over our own power that we were elected to carry out to one member of the board and an unelected person. And I vocalizing these concerns in advance so that you can have an opportunity to maybe reconsider or maybe consider what your stance on those policy changes are for when it comes up to the discussion at the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have any more public? I think you can probably hear me. Do they have any more public participation? I see other people online. I see if anyone else wanted to participate right now. All right, so we are going to move on. We have no old business, we have new business. Our first discussion is the updated legislation. The first policy we're going to be discussing is policy 6146. Actually, one of my Bible books, grading / assessment system weighted grades.
Excellent.
Turn this over to you, Mr. Forty.
Thank you so much. So even what we heard in public participation and then going into the policies that we are going to continue to review, not just in this meeting, but moving forward. I think it's always important to kind of rewind and go back to where we started when we opened as a policy committee in the first meeting or two, where we kind of set the stage for what our role is, what our purpose is, and why we're here to do the work we do. So I did provide a few documents just for that purpose in the agenda. And so I just wanted to share with everyone and give everyone a little time just to kind of review the first document, which highlights the method of operation.
Is this is this in the board agenda so people at home can see it, or do we need to read it out?
It is all on our website and
I'm
available.
wondering, you have such a soothing voice. I'm wondering if we need to read it out loud so people at home don't have to muddle through finding it.
We could absolutely do a read
Why
aloud.
don't you do that?
And I will do the read aloud.
Okay.
All right.
I'll read aloud.
What's that? Maybe we'll share documents. We'll do a round robin.
Do you,
Um,
I can, if you give me the website, I can, it's a link public where we can share it.
It
through
is.
chat.
It's right off of our
Oh,
website.
popcorn reading it.
We can.
Especially the equity and policy ones are on our policy.
Mhm. Mhm. And this one is too. It's right off the initial website off the Board of Education part if you go to NPSC. So the first document is the bylaws of the board and its methods of operation. And the Newington Board of Education shall concern itself only with broad questions of policy and not with administrative details. The board shall rely upon the superintendent of schools to recommend policies for adoption and to administer policies enacted by the board. Such policies shall be broad enough to indicate a line of action to be taken by the superintendent in the development of administrative regulations. Application of such policies and regulations is an administrative function. The superintendent is responsible for the formulation, assurance, amendment, and deletion of administrative regulations to implement the policies of the board. The superintendent shall determine the need to bring to attention of the board any new, revised, or deleted administrative regulations. The Board of Education and town government work cooperatively and efficiently through numerous shared service agreements. Although services are shared and roles of the two bodies are very often misunderstood by local residents when attempts to compare the operations of local government and those of the Board of Education are made. The two are separate entities that operate independently of each other. Each municipality operates under a charter. Board of Education coexists in harmony under the rules of the charter unless it prohibits or restricts the Board of Education from carrying out its duty to the state. In these cases, the local municipal charter does not apply to the Board of Education as it must carry out its responsibilities to the state. Conflict over finances is common among the elected bodies as they each perform different roles. There are checks and balances to be sure each elected body carries out its individual responsibilities. The local Board of Finance has final authority over the budget allocation for the Board of Education. The Board of Education has complete authority to operate as it sees fit and cannot be restricted by other locally elected bodies. I just share this mostly in our work for the top part. I think that's most relevant to where we are and what we're considering, only because the relevance in we organize and develop policy, so that way administration under the guidance of the superintendent can build the regulation around that. And like it reads, it's very important when regulatory changes are made that they be brought to the attention of the board, so the board is aware of how the regulation is informing how the policy is implemented. That makes sense.
Can I also add last time we met, which was not last week. I like you, I don't like you that much. That a lot of the changes that we make come directly from Cape.
Yes.
And so we take the new policies, we take the state policies and the Cape policies, and we kind of cut and paste them into the policies so that we are in compliance. So a lot of them aren't started, I don't think any of them, I don't think we started any. Started from scratch, they come from Cape, so.
So I guess too, in terms of a lot of it, especially the policies will be tonight are also not this, but state statute regulations outside the legislature. Okay. So I just want to make sure, and in terms of our policies, I know oftentimes we get discussions here about this, but as pertinent to the ones tonight too, because I know we get into kind of that implementation aspect of it. We talked about the state previous policies, that line between us going beyond our duties of being board members to say, okay, you know, this is the policy at broad high level, and then how you implement it.
Mhm.
And you were great. I don't know if it's my question is it your duty to report on your implementation to us? I think you do no matter what, but I don't know if you're required to.
Right. So I love that question, because I think the reality is it's not required. However, in our bylaws and what I just read, it does read that it's appropriate for us to report to you when revisions are made, when changes are made and such. So I think we take that seriously. And I think we, love the partnership of we create policy together and then you entrust us to create regulation that's going to put policy into practice. And we want to make sure that those things are in unison as much as possible. And so that way you are well informed also when maybe a policy revision is needed, because oftentimes we learn that through how we're implementing it at times, and other times based on legislative mandates. So it's a combination of all, and so I think that's critical.
I just wanted to say that constantly are bringing up new policies.
It's yeah, I love it.
Good
I can hear
So
Soothing things.
the next the very next document simply is just our mission, goals, and objectives. And in these, I'm sorry. I won't read it out loud, but I do think it's important just for us all to be aware that we have an overall purpose, right? Which is to educate all children and to support the academic and social well-being of all students. And I just think that comes through often in what we talk about. So when we talk about policy, the main reason we would want to use this again as like a third point that we often refer back to is because it kind of grounds us in what we're trying to achieve through policy. We're trying to achieve this, our mission and our goals for our students. And that's something that I know you and the superintendent create collaboratively and is reviewed, I think, every 2 or 3 years. So that's just an important piece that when we make policy decisions, we have to recognize the impact that they may have on all children and make them in the best interest of all students that we have here in Newington. And then the other documents are simply, again, found on our website, but the equity lens that we agreed to look through with that kind of ladder of equity that we looked at and thought, wow, that made a lot of sense, where not all students start off at the same place or have the same resources and same access. And what our hope to do is to be able to align all of our resources so that way all students have access to a quality education and an equitable education. And that's our goal. And I think, I've just enjoyed the opportunity to work collaboratively to try to build policy that does this, because I think we've brought this lens to a lot of policy already in our short time together. And I look forward to continuing that. So just wanted to kind of bring us back to that and ground us. And then the very last is the policy review prompts, the things that we try to ask ourselves. And sometimes number 4 to me tends to be number 1. What could potentially be the disproportionate impact that it's going to have on subgroups of students, when we make decisions in policy. So I just thought I'd bring that to light and just have it before us, so that way when we move forward with discussion and recommendations that we may consider bringing to the full board, that we do so in a way that takes into account everything that we kind of say we believe in as both a board of education and subcommittee that's charged to do this work, and what we kind of co-created as well together, when we formed and united. So with that said, our first item on the agenda is to review the grading assessment systems weighted grades policy, and I am going to put that up on the screen for others to be able to view in a moment. I would just share that there is the policy up front, and then underneath all that would be the regulation. So there are 2 things that will show when we share this, and I just have to get to the right policies. So if I'm not mistaken, I believe I'm sharing it. I am. Okay. So this is a policy that was reviewed last year, updated last year, and I believe approved in June 2022. June 2022. Yep. And so that was passed by the Board of Education. There was a request to review it again, specific to the discussion around class rank. And I think I'm sorry?
And it's not being asked on the comment. That's where this came from.
The contextualization of,
is that it's asked for on the comment.
correct. It's an optional field in the Common App. And so with that being said, I'll turn the floor over.
Scroll all the way to the bottom. I believe what I was told was that it says my school doesn't do.
Okay.
I think I just want to distinguish a required section, but the
It's
option.
required. You can say that it's not, but it is part of the required sections.
Excellent. Okay. So with that said, I would open the floor to a discussion, and I would also just share for the audience who is maybe virtual right now, I did,
Still there, so you can see the minutes.
they are, I can't control both because I don't have two screens. So if I'm here, I can't like scroll down and
Okay.
scroll, but yes, people are still here. I do want others to know, we did invite, Kristen Freeman in, Director of Curriculum Assessment and Instruction, and Seth Korn, Director of Counseling, and a few other things. And so,
So I noticed that one of your tabs that you had up there was the benefits of doing away with the. Let's just cut to the chase. I saw it up there. When you had it up there, there's one of your choices was it was on one of your tabs.
that might be in other
A
things.
different thing? Okay.
Yeah,
All
sorry.
So I brought this up, I will be honest, my concern, and this stems from 4 years ago when I was on the curriculum committee, is the way that we do things for grading. I'm concerned that even if, and I know that the both of you had said, you've talked to colleges and they say they don't care. But if at any point in time, a parent who is our taxpayers and pay your salaries, they pay mine just in a different town, right? Has any inclination to say, the reason why my child didn't get into school is because we aren't giving that information. Even if it's not true, putting that doubt in a parent's mind it seems like it's such if a parent, and we talked about this last time, if a parent asks why we can't give it, I'm not saying publicize it, I'm not saying put it in lights. Now, in addition, what's come to light since then is the letter. If I showed this to my child, I would be probably talking to a mental health. You're worried about his mental health. If I showed my kid that he doesn't have a 4.1, he would feel doubt. He applied to all of his colleges on the basis that he had a 4.1 GPA. And then I'm going to show him that he doesn't. We either have to not weight our grades. We are not telling the kids where they truly are when they're applying for colleges. So I'm not showing him that. He doesn't need to know that, but that's a problem. It's a big difference.
I'm just saying,
Sure,
because
I'm
we're
sorry.
in a hybrid model.
So
Yeah.
There's some new program that if you have a certain GPA and it asks for the school is supposed to give the GPA and the weighted, the percentile. We don't have to do that because they waived that, but they had to change the GPA to match it with everyone else so that it's no longer a weighted GPA. So my son believes that he's got a 4.1 when he really only has like a 3. He can pass off, yes.
Is this for automatic,
So
the state
Yeah, that went out here
legislation that
when
just
we
came
say
out?
we're worried about mental health and we're worried about the kids not being competitive and we're worried about this, like that is a way to knock one of your high kids down so quick, it's not even fun. And I'm concerned, again, now as a parent, I'm like, I'm a board member, but are other parents getting this going like, what? Like, I didn't know that because I didn't know that. And I'm entrenched in the board, I'm entrenched in the field, and it's just concerning that we aren't, there's a disconnect somewhere. So I don't know where the answer is, whether it's give them a rank, give them a weight, give them, I don't know.
And I just so I can better understand. So based on Newington Public Schools GPA, he had or has
I
a
think a 4.1
point something, higher than a 4.0. However, when the ranks are recalculated to match other high school system, it comes out to be. I just want to make sure I understand it because this
Yeah.
is
So,
all
that's a good question.
old
So-
and new.
Yeah, so I'm going to just tell you as far as the letter and the auto admissions program, I can say I completely agree with your sentiments. This legislation came out last year. The state, I have been on many phone calls for probably the last month, talking with the head of the state of Department of Education about this program. And not only myself, but other directors of school counselors, other administrators have voiced their concern about this program and the rollout. It's legislation that went through. I can say I don't think it was really well thought out, and the right players weren't at the table when discussing the rollout of this legislation. I think last week I literally had my last phone call with the State Department of Education to discuss that program. And what we were told as school districts is that we are required by the Connecticut Auto Emissions Program, and this is from the Connecticut Connecticut College Board of Regents, so all the state schools, they determine what GPA that we are going to calculate. Now, I can show you what it looks like, but one of my contentions when looking deeper into it is that they're using an example from College Board, which is a non-weighted GPA scale. And even when you look at it, a D- counts as an F. So 0 quality points. So even the rating, the GPA that we're required to recalculate as part of that program isn't necessarily a true unweighted GPA. And the boiler letter that you're showing that your son received and that you received, that is something that,
I'm sure
Yeah.
you'll never know
Well,
about this.
well, that you received my Parent Square notification from was something that we were told the boiler letter that we had to use. We could not change it or alter it. We have to follow the procedures and protocols of it. So I can say respectfully that many of my colleagues in the state have expressed their concerns, and actually the head of the State Department of Education that oversaw this program has actually asked me personally to be a part of the committee to relook at this legislation and talk to legislators and the governor about this new auto admissions, because I think not only does it send the wrong message to our kids, but we even talked about it at the high school instructional leadership team about what pressure does this give to them teachers and students, of course. Like that was always in our mind, but also the pressure of teachers and grading and what message does this truly send to our students. I think my personal belief is I think it's well intended. A place like Newington, I think, our students, our top kids are going on to a four-year universities, but I think of some of the more urban districts where there's a student that maybe never got told that you can go to college and you're in that top. I can definitely see how this is beneficial for students in those districts that maybe don't have as much support or as much access to support as Newington does. But it was a mandated requirement by the state.
So this letter, like I said, it's just another evidence of what we talked about in June. We want our kids to know where they stand, right? And I think that's important. And I think it's really important and I've been concerned about like grade inflation, not just here, like probably across the country, but across the state. Like we want our kids to look good, and like we want our school systems and the pressures from the state department and the federal. And I understand that whole thing. But my concern is like when we had this conversation 4 years in curriculum, we want our grades to actually reflect the kids, what they know, right? So, and we're now changing things, right? This is a different grade. So, and I know that you talked about 4 years ago that when they go to colleges, it doesn't care if we give them like, smileys and sad faces, whatever. It doesn't matter because the colleges are going to change and put it on their own grading level. My concern with that is still like, are we accurately letting kids know where they stand when it comes to the more competitive? Actually, it doesn't even mean you're not a competitive. Like even if a kid's like not going for those upper echelon schools, but is going for a middle of the road school, and where they think their GPA says, yeah, you're there, but they're actually like, number, 299 out of 300, they might go, oh, okay, maybe I'm not there. I feel like at least with letting them know their percentile, it gives them like, compared to my peers, this is where I'm at, because this is a moving target. Because it is a moving target, because you said so yourself, but the colleges change it up. The state changes it up, right? So that's still a moving target, because when a kid goes to look for colleges, one of the main things on Naviance is what's your GPA? Where's that dot going to be? Well, if that dot moves, it just gives them another data point to say, but I'm also in the top 7%, or the top 20, the top 30, the top 40. And I guess I still don't quite understand why we can say to a kid, you're not good enough to play a sport. You're not good enough to be in a role, the lead in a play. You're not good enough to be chair one, but we can't say to a kid, but you are in the top 10%. Like that's where you found. And so that's where I'm concerned. And I'm not, and this isn't, I don't want this to ever come across that this is about my kid. My kid's done. Like, my kids are done, which is why I've kind of waited and brought it back up after everything's been done. There's nothing more I can do for my kids. I'm looking at future kids and having them honestly, as much as possible, understand where they are, be told where they're at. It's okay to say to a kid, you're in the top 50%. It's okay, right? And then the mental health becomes, it's okay to not be the top of everything, because we don't want kids to think everyone doesn't need a trophy. Like, that's not healthy. So I'm just still under the mindset that I would love to see, because this moves, but class rank, at least you can compare and be, okay, at least I know in my school system, I'm in the top 80%.
Go ahead. So, and not spiral.
Hi.
I think we have similar sentiments because I went through similar kind of experience. But I was talking on the call with my mom the other day, and we were talking about it, and she said one of the big things was the school issued scholarships that they send out asked for our class rank. So that's where like the discrepancy was for me, where she was like, I was begging to get your class rank, which I was given, but like secretly on a piece of paper. I didn't tell anyone, and it wasn't my thing, and I wasn't gonna let the next person for it. But we once asked, like, and that's what we were talking about. Like, if you ask, they can get, and we want to make sure that that's right in the policy. To be honest, yeah, and like that's where I was saying, like, the scholarships ask for too that we issue. So like, if we can't give the class rank. Yes, go ahead.
We're not real formal here, so.
Part of the regulation stipulates that we would never withhold class rank when money is on the line. That is written.
Okay.
Part of the regulation that when scholarships are asking for it, we provide it on that.
Right here is number 2.
Okay.
Okay, so
Kind of
this is
addresses
where,
that.
Yeah, I guess so. Like, what's the difference from the scholarship versus like the
well, so this is where my concern is when we say money.
Yeah.
Okay, so we know, and I think you know, I'm sure you know, that the higher universities that ask for class rank give out a heck of a lot more financial aid than your public universities. So it is money for certain things. It is. So again, I don't mean this, it's not about me. I preface this with my kids are done. There's nothing more I can do. My kids got into schools that gave them a ton of money because financially we needed it. And it was a heck of a lot more than what we got offered from the state schools. So the higher class rank to get into the better universities absolutely is about money for some people. It is. And we can talk about it offline. I'm not going to share my financial with the world, but we can certainly talk about that. I can give you very specific details, but it absolutely, and my kids got into middle of the road schools, and my kids got into I call them hoity-toity schools, and it was much more financially beneficial for them to go to the upper echelon schools.
I guess
So I do think it could, I think
Can I
I'm
ask a
saying it's
question
not
on that,
about
though?
money, yes.
Because I've gone through the process a few times now myself, and not personally, and and
Have no chance to be applied for help.
and I've never been able to make that correlation though, that class rank somehow equated to some type of financial merit, unless it was specific to a scholarship that required the class rank. But
Okay, I don't know, but I do know, again, that I know people for a fact that got offered scholarships to colleges that paid for $60,000 out of a $69,000 school. Now, if you don't get into one of those colleges, right? Those big, huge, if you look up like the most economical, the top 25 most economical universities, it's Columbia, it's NYU, it's BU, like there's a list of them. And they're all those schools that are like hard to get into, that all on their application ask for class rank. Not all, I shouldn't say that, that's a lot, but many do. They do. And so like Harvard is another one that will meet 100% of your financial need. So I agree, it is crazy, and if you make less than $125,000 a year, I believe now is Harvard, they will guarantee that they pay for your kid to go to college. we need to advertise that to kids to say, like, it's good to work hard and get into it. Like, I know that some kids, like, there's challenges and they can't, but I think we need to let people know that, because I don't think a lot, like, we know that because people talk, and so it goes on, but like, that is something that needs to be like advertised. People need to know that. So I do think that it is actually tied to the higher class rank. I think really is tied indirectly to finances. I do.
I'm just gonna bring you back. Yeah, I think we want to get this policy when this happened, like in my situation, because I requested this because
Why
there
does it have it that?
That
That was just added.
that an institution awarding a scholarship for me. Like, 'cause I thought we did.
Mhm.
Okay. The institution part, because
Yeah.
my understanding of where the verbiage should be, like if there's a request of, because we didn't,
Oh, you're saying it to the end of the thing.
yeah, like they gave it to the parent because it's multiple institutions awarding the scholarships via. So like the request was from my mom or me to get our class rank instead of, like it said, how maybe shared directly with that institution. Like she shared it directly with me because because I'm filling out the application for it because they're from multiple institutions. So I guess like that makes it a little right?
Yeah, to clarify this language, and I remember the conversation back in June, is, we know that class rank is not required for application to any institution, because, some of the most elite private schools have no classroom.
Right.
They don't have any, and about 50% of public schools across the United States don't have class rank, so that they cannot require them. That language was put in there. Heaven forbid, and from what I've heard from Seth, this has never happened. But let's say in some weird event, college admissions officers, I don't want to take this greasy guy, but I'm not really sure. I wish I had this one because it would, at the best of my knowledge, it's never happened. That's the only reason that language is there. That it would come from the institution. The admissions officer would say, I'm the person making the decision about this student.
And there's actually been law cases as well that it went to, one factor. And there's actually, I think there's something now, the Supreme Court talking about factors of college admissions.
Yeah.
And that a college does not make, a decision based on one factor alone. Back in June, we discussed this. One thing that I emphasize, and we emphasize the students as well, is that holistic profile that colleges are looking at. And that's why you're seeing, like when I've reported the NACAC, which is the National Admissions Counselor organization, where admissions counselors and school counselors are a part of, and class rank and other things have really gone farther down the list, again, because they're looking at that holistic point of view. And one thing I also want to say, one of the things we did talk about at that June meeting too, is students being to know where they are within their class. So we provide a school profile, which gives information all about Newington, all about our school, what are the different options, such as AP, dual credit classes, so on and so forth. But another piece that we added on to that is there is a bar graph distribution of students' GPAs, and it says how many students are within that class, or how many students are in that class, and then how many students are in that bar, so that a student or a parent could see, where the students within the class without putting a percentile or a number to it. But it's also for the admissions counselor also see where they are within their class holistically as well. So it's not that we don't provide any information of where a student is within their cohort. That information is provided, and that part, or I should say, that school profile goes to every single school that students apply to. And admissions counselors that I talk to, they study those pretty hard because we have, depending on which university, they usually are given regions or certain parts of the state where their part of their job is to become experts, to know about Newington High School, to know about West Hartford, West Hartford, knowing about Cromwell and what our rigor is, what is our school, like what things do we offer to our students. So, and another thing we shared is, Kristen mentioned about 50% of high schools not offering class rank. And we also looked at just even, and I think we shared with you last time too, just the information I collected of schools that are in Connecticut that are no longer reporting it, and even like West Hartford is no longer reporting. I
I
think,
love how you look at me
you know,
when you say, like, West Hartford.
well, no, but well, I'm thinking of our neighbors. West Hartford doesn't report it anymore. I believe Southington doesn't report it anymore. And in fact, those that still do, I know Wilton doesn't because my sister works up in Wilton, but those that do still report it, they put in additional comments, but we're working on eliminating.
So, so I'm gonna let it go because you clearly aren't gonna ever see my side on this, but, so I'm gonna move to like your bar graph you're talking about.
Mhm.
So even that, again, we stick to like, I just stick to, like, kids are good at different things, right? Everyone is good at something, right? I'm really good at baking a chocolate chip cookie. I will make them on for you. We're gonna have a competition, just to let you know. Right? We all have a strength. And I just feel like some kids' strengths is their academics. I've seen children who their strength is not academics, and I've worked with them and I've built them up that your strength is you're going to do better in life because, and we've talked about that, right? Because you get people and you get how to be human, right? Everyone has a strength. So that bar chart the bar graph that you're referring to, like I looked at it as a parent, and even still, I'm like, okay, like, are you on this side of the bar graph or that side of the bar graph? And so for some of those, it's a big difference. And then the SATs were broken up into, if I remember correctly, 1,400 to 1,600. Like, how many got into that? Well, there's a big difference between a kid who gets in the 1,400s and a kid who gets into the 1,600. Into the 16 gets like even that, like, it's still like this like broad thing. So even if we just narrow that down more, even at least the SATs into 100 or 100 increments, right? So because there is, and I think it's then 1,200 to 1,400, right? There's a big difference between a kid who gets 1,200 and a kid who gets a 1,390. It's a big difference. And I just feel like we need to make sure kids, and along those lines, like, so you're in this like, right? So I don't want kids going to colleges that are too hard, but I certainly don't want kids going to colleges that are too easy. Like, we want every kid to achieve where they should be. And I just feel like I can't control other towns, not that I control this town, but I don't have a say in other towns. I at least have to put on the record that I am concerned that we aren't doing a good enough job of letting kids know really where they're at. And I'm talking high school. I'm not like, I actually would love to see nothing more than like mastery, like we had talked about that, right? You've mastered the materials, you're above the master, you're below it, because then they know, right? They know where they're at. But those like nonchalant A's, it's like, what does that really mean? And then you talk about the comparisons. I know you're always gonna add something. So
Well, I think we do see eye to eye. I think like, yeah, we're not in the day to day, and I think we tell me all the statistics, yeah, and it's just a personal experience, right? If you talk to everybody, the anecdotal things, and you're like, okay, where am I at? And to be honest, like, if you're good with percentage, I'm thinking just like the outright class rate. Like, my parents went to school, it was like, someone moved out, and they're like, everybody moved up the slot. My mom went to 3, and we're like, sweet. And I guess my question is, like, two, like, one, the first and the second person that would have been, right? I just want to play this devil's advocate. Okay, so we say, like, class rank is really important, blah, blah, blah. But now we're saying all these people aren't reporting class rank, and now it's not as important. It's going down the list of importance, right? So what's the issue in still? Like, that's kind of my point too. Like, is it so bad that it's going to make everyone competitive and all this stuff, right? That it's like so big that we just say it's not that important compared to like all these other factors and all this. And again, it's one piece, and we know that. It's just, it just takes me back to like when we were applying. It's like every single point you want on, and it is the high achieving students that really care about it. Everybody else, it's the high achieving parents that really care about it. But they're like, what the heck? I want every single dollar, penny. I want every single point on point. So I mean, I guess that's my point. And I get it. Like, there's no way with class ranking stuff. Also doing away with LSAT, and doing away with all these other things, and doing away with that would just mean that there's still that, even higher level thing where it's like, what's important? How do we judge people on a, apples to apples basis, right? Like, where's that common core? So for me, it's like, I already know who 1 and 2 are, like from 3 to 5, from 10 to 12. Like, I was like, is it gonna cause the if that was the goal. I don't know. To me, the biggest issue with class rank is between the 1 and 2. Like, those are the people that are, like, that's where the cheating, yeah, like, that's where the concern comes for me. And we already have, like, we're not eliminating that. We're not eliminating the valedictorian.
Do you want to? Because we're the policy
Oh
committee,
my
so
gosh. No, I think it's
Throwing it
amazing.
out
Like,
there.
like,
That's my
it's such
personal
a thing,
philosophy.
Because I was raised, and like, I'm trying not to, from the equity lens, I'm trying to say, like, obviously, we're biased and our views and our personal experiences, right? So like, I'm looking at it from like, competition's a good thing, like she said, like, we see it everywhere else, like, we want kids in academic goals, we want kids competing for each other, we want them to strive like the American dream of being the smartest citizen, because we're certainly not competing with other countries, like, on the same level, so I guess my mindset too is like, is it gonna destroy everyone's mental health, or is it not that important anymore, right? So like, that's where I'm just trying to make those realities important.
So a few things.
And I recognize we're like coming out, like,
Yeah,
what,
and I
we
think,
have this view, but that's our like experience.
I think one, when we talk about where students are, that is the purpose of standards-based grading, is that we want to make sure that all of our assessments are aligned to academic standards. I would love to have a standards-based report card at the high school. We're not ready for it yet. We're just not ready for it yet. And that's not just, a mountain that we're ready to climb quite yet. However, slowly making that transition, we hope to see it in 5th grade where it's super appropriate and start seeing that move up. But what we have done with our assessments is to ensure that those assessments are aligned to standards, so that when a student earns an A or earns a B or earns a C, it's not about willy-nilly, Seth got the 5 extra points because he knew the extra credit, which had nothing to do with the standard, or Danielle brought in the 5 canned goods, and so I'm gonna give her an extra point.
Cookies.
Like, all of those stuff that a lot of us grew up with, we've really done away with that, and so we really wanna make sure that the assessments themselves are aligned with standards. Kids get grading practices from their teachers that tell them an 87 means this, in descriptive words about what that is. And those are the words that we want to use to help kids understand, quote unquote, where they are. I believe that when we put class rank in, what we say is your achievement is worthy when it's better than all of those other kids. So what do we now say to all of those other kids? That's the voice that I'm bringing to the table, is all of those other kids. But I also bring to the table too, is the worthiness of being number 4. That, Jessica, some of the words that you used is about, you said, and we tried to get points. So this relationship between a teacher and a student now becomes transactional. What can I do for Miss Weaver or do to impress her so I can get a point? So I can get better, so I can get better, so I can be number 3 and I can be better than. In my beliefs, that is completely antithetical to learning and the kinds of relationships that we want to have with kids. We want kids to have the passion and enthusiasm for learning that they have when they're in elementary school. And the time that it starts to switch is the moment that we say, you're an 87, you're a 92, oh, but you're a 91 because you missed that thing. And that's when it goes away. By keeping a system in place that ranks kids, whether it is secretive, whether we only give it this way, only do it that way, we're upholding and keeping a system in place that is good for maybe 10 kids. And I would argue that knowing about the mental health issues that arise from kids who are chomping at the bit for points. So those are kind of all of the things that I think about. And when I think about too, also about how grades are earned, I just go back to the structures and how our American school system was built. It was not built for all of the students that were in front of us. And we know that we talk about that as a lot as a district. All of the changes that we have to make that we haven't made yet, because it's going to take us a long time. So where I'm really struggling is saying, we're going to keep a system in place that brings kids from the best to the last, knowing, and we know full well, that not everybody arrives into Newington High School with all of the same opportunities, but we're still going to do it because the parent wants it or the kids wants it. So I am advocating for all of those other kids and those families and those parents that aren't here, and what I do believe is good for all kids.
So I hear what you're saying, and the way you say it makes me warm and fuzzy inside, and I'm like, I agree with you. I wish I had to agree. My concern, and I've shared this with Steve, is that disconnect because it doesn't go throughout everything else, right? So that's where so I agree with you. Why are we telling someone you're not worthy? Why are we telling someone that they can, afford private viola? I'm going to pick things, never affect my family, right? Private viola lessons because they're wealthy, so they get the better opportunity to go to this and do that because their parents, could afford that. And so we have that system that you're talking about. It's pervasive in all school systems, not just Newington, right? So, and this is clearly not along this policy, but then maybe we need to look at other things where we're doing the same things to kids because we're saying we don't want to do it academically, which I agree with you the way you said it, but we also don't want to do it in other ways, right? We don't want to say to a kid like you don't get to, can go compete in FBLA because you did this, or you don't get to go to the DECA thing because you didn't do this. Because we're doing it to kids that under that guise of, right? Why are we saying to a kid, you're not worthy because you didn't come in, and it's a good possibility because you didn't come in with that same opportunity, but that is pervasive throughout all public schools, right? That's in almost everything that the kids do. So I think we probably need to look at a lot of other things. Not tonight.
So that's what I'm hearing though. I'm hearing the argument that we need to look at more areas of the organization where we can improve access for all students. And yet, but what I'm also hearing maybe indirectly is it wouldn't be though to put another thing in that would restrict access. Because what we also know beyond your cookies being fabulous is that
just wait. That's my goal this weekend. Game on.
is that we see, and we just are coming off the heels of a survey from students about mental health, and an essay from students about mental health. It is, and I don't know, what is it, not even a month old, right?
Yeah.
The data, it is beyond anything we ever could have
Absolutely
imagined. And that isn't a good thing.
I agree.
When I say it that way.
And I do agree that under what you said, it makes sense. It makes sense though, and I can agree that what you're saying makes total sense. So along those lines, maybe the next policies we need to look at is where else in the district under that guise is the same thing happening.
We can remove barriers. Absolutely. That's where this comes in, and that's what I'd love to
So
do.
I would be okay with letting this go under that, but then we definitely need to look at some other things. But that's just me, but she's not okay with, but I'm always speaking.
Well, I know you haven't spoken much, so, okay.
So, yeah. Well, no, so I haven't spoken much because, though I am doing well, obviously now, I was not in the top 10, 15, 20. I was not in the bottom. I was just very happy to be in the middle. I was involved, I know we're not surprised, in several clubs and activities and organizations and
They have to
blah,
sing it.
of course. Yeah, all the things. But school was something for sure that I definitely, especially when it came to math, I had to really work at. It was very challenging for me. And I remember my parents scraping together money to pay for SAT tutoring because they wanted me to get a great grade. And I remember when I got my score back on the SATs, and I didn't do well because I was so stressed. Yeah. The guilt that I felt for putting that down on the table because money was attached to it was really, really difficult. However, if I had, as a child, if it had been looked at, if my performance had been looked at under a standards-based performance evaluation, I think it would show that I had mastered the skills and the standards. And just anecdotally, this year in what I'm teaching, I am assessing my students and their report cards are standards-based. And the conversations I had recently at conferences were much different than my previous job. when I was giving students percentages. And I think sometimes for some kids, especially some of our students who aren't coming into the same opportunities, seeing that 67, because they didn't do a whole lot of homework, they got all of the concepts and then some. You know, so I'm sorry that I'm really not making sense, perhaps. But I love that you brought up thinking about that mastery base. And I think as part of curriculum committee, chair curriculum, or whatever that is, thinking about that would be important because I just think it's a different way to look at kids. As I said, the way we used to look at kids, educate children, give them opportunities years ago was not the same. Thank goodness we have made these changes and strides because a student like myself wouldn't have felt that guilt that I still twinge whenever I even talk about SATs or class rank because I don't know what my class rank was. I didn't want to know. It was a competition. I felt like my family, between relatives, and I didn't want to be a part of that because it felt like I was letting my family down. Not because I didn't know my stuff, right? I did my homework, but I was getting a B, not the A. So. But I do hear what you're saying.
I just wanna, because I think it was really well put. That, and I'm just gonna come from the perspective of like, I'm type of AAA. Like the student that
She's taking AAA, not today.
Okay.
That's
A,
type
A,
A.
Oh, got it.
Super
Got it.
nervous.
A cute.
I was like,
Okay.
thank you. I took that as a compliment. From that perspective, I think your vision for what could be is awesome. My concern is colleges aren't on that same mindset. Like, I viewed high school, and this is just being quite honest, it was a game. Get as many points as you can to get into the right college. I mean, college the same way. Don't take the hardest classes, take whatever, and you get X, Y, and Z. Because to me, it's a transactional relationship, particularly in college, because I'm paying money for you to give me a degree. At the end, that's all I get. I get some education, and I'll say it's whatever, but when you're talking about $200,000, it's like, I'm getting my bang for my buck and I'm getting a good job and I'm getting that, whatever. And to me, I don't want kids to view it that way, but I think the reality is they do because, and quite frankly, I think it's just part of presentation and culture is that you are told, like, and it started way back when we see them surge and going to college. And I don't want it to be the way, but I don't want to say like, oh, it is the way it is and we can't change it. But I think it is one of the things where we have to see, it would have to be a top-down situation where colleges didn't acknowledge GPAs and all these other things, and they were just like free willing. And I don't see that day coming soon. It will come, maybe. I'm not sure, but when you look at American universities, it's like this is the top tier. This is what you want, and I can just hear like, I'm not gonna say like Republican minded, but like the gritty clear books of, you know, like talk about very brief jobs, like the first thing what's toxic, and I know this is toxic, but the first thing you said was I care about like what about those other kids who aren't? And my first reaction was do better. Like that's not a good thing, but it's like that was what I heard to myself. Like that's what my parents were even on me about it. But the type is like, you're not doing good now, do better, get the points, get whatever you can. And this is obviously when you get like extra credit on it, you think you didn't reach the test, like all this other stuff. But I'm thinking and I'm seeing like, and it is a mental health thing, but on a different scale. But if I don't get it, like that's something that it's very hard to weed out when it's programmed into me that you're like, if I don't get into college, I don't get, like there's a transactional linear line of thought. If I don't get into college, I won't get a job. I won't get a job. I won't be able to buy a house, which is not true. And then I won't be able to support my family. And I feel like this obligation is like, no one put that in me. I don't have a tiger mom. She's like, I'm proud of you no matter what. She's like, hippie dippy cool. But there is this sense, and I don't think it comes from the school even. It just comes from any social media. It is like how it is, right? So to say that you don't want it to be a game, I 100% agree. To say that that's not still going to be the reality, I think it's false. I think that will continue to be the case as long as colleges say, we have this many valedictorians, we have this X amount of, I'll just put a booklet down and it will tell you every single statistic about what they do. Oh, we have like this much X, Y, and Z. They're already ingraining it in you to be like, you want to be the best, you do the best and you get the best. So that's already like in the culture to me. And if you're type A, you're gonna feed to that. So like, how do you say to a type A, they don't know about it? Like they're hungry for it because that's their personality. Sorry.
Because it report to them. Mr. Court.
It's not really a retort, but it's more of, I think colleges are changing. the change you talk about, is it right around the corner? No.
Yeah.
But, my discussion with admissions counselors and talking about that holistic, profile, looking at all the entities and the things that they can bring to a university. I'm just going to go to one of the good things that came from COVID is that many universities are staying SAT test optional. UConn, I went to their counselor day a couple weeks ago, and they're going to continue with the optional feature for the next 2 years, and then they're really going to review the data to see, by being test optional, did that benefit us? Because maybe the SAT wasn't really showing us college readiness. And there used to be a couple colleges on that test optional list, but now I would say there's a good 1,000 on that. SAT 2s have been eliminated. I also am on the college board doing the regional council, and they're increasing AP enrollment because they're seeing that the SATs, like colleges, are not looking at those. It's a data point.
Yeah.
And even scholarships, to universities, they're saying you don't have to submit those. We're going to evaluate you based on what you bring to the table, your grades, and your transcript, not a number. We're going to look at you holistically, and we're also going to look to see what else do you bring to our university. In Newington, we don't have, if you live in Newington, you go to Newington. When you apply to universities and colleges, what they're trying to do is they're trying to create their next class. And that might mean that we're looking for, I always bring up, Kristen's, her kids were into band, but we have our trumpet players leaving. So we need to find a trumpet player. Or Mr. Parisi, I look at his daughter is going to play lacrosse. They're looking for a new lacrosse player. So those are aspects, right? Beyond just that one entity, it's not the only judgment they make, but they're going to look at, do you meet the minimum requirements for a university? Do you meet your GPA requirements? Have you taken the classes that they would require for you to take? It's not just one data point. And the unfortunate part is that the news and the media has portrayed that, this race to nowhere, like us type A'ers, that we have to keep building points. And I always ask the question, I know there's also a plans proposal for supporting our high achieving students, and what anxiety or what mental health does that bring to our student population? Because to me, that's an unhealthy. But it's a toxic, unhealthy environment that creates. So, but to bring it all together, my point is that colleges are changing. They are looking at students and their applicants a lot differently, and they also understand that their students, just like ours, are a lot different these days based on the pandemic, and they have to use a different lens when making decisions.
So I think I'm gonna pull my chair. I think we're twirling, and we've been speaking about it for a long time. Kristen Davis, probably the most eloquent way to explain it. I do think that Jess and I probably have the mindset of like, we want to worry about everyone, but we want to worry about the top of the echelon too. I just want to state one more time that, then being, if we keep this, because we only rate policy, but the follow through of the policy comes from the district. I would like junior, senior counselors to do a better job of really letting the kids know where, without a number, but like let them know, like, yeah, you're the top of your class. You're the middle of the, I mean, then it's not about, you don't tell the middle of the class, but I just, in anecdotal from other people, kids who are in the top of the class have zero clue. And I understand we don't need to advertise it and tell the bottom half of the class, the best of the world.
Middle.
It's funny because you say like, we did percentiles in my high school, and I was in the 30th percentile. I was like, oh, whatever, who cares? So I just want to make sure that we are doing our due diligence as a district to really make those kids know that they really are special, and that's there's we can tell kids they're special in lots of different ways, but and Steve said, well, we do the honor roll, and we do the breakfast for and like when I look at an honor roll and I look at the high honor roll and the TAFL kids, and okay, that's great that 50% are doing well, but like I'm talking about our upper Jessica's of the world, not me. because I'm
Not
public.
really.
So I just want to make sure that I never hear an anecdotal from any child or any parent that, well, my kid has no idea that they're smart. That's a problem.
And I would, if I may speak, if
You
I
can,
would
but
love
very
for-
casual. in this policy.
I would love for those parents to come forward and provide me that information, so to make sure that the counselors are providing the information that they're looking for. Because that's,
4,000
yeah.
tomorrow. I'm sorry.
I don't mind it, and I would appreciate it because it's feedback for our department, right, on how we can best support students and families in making those secondary choices, whether that's a four-year college, a career, technology,
Right.
tech
Like,
school,
and
whatever it may be. I just ask for any of those individuals to please, email me, call me. I'm more than happy to step in so we can have that discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I think we obviously that's what. Not one, so not really appreciate all your time there. I think like one of the things is just it's balancing where kids are going, and what those demands are, and we know it is changing, but how can we, like you said, those kids who are trying to get the points, they're trying to get the points everywhere. So they're trying to get the whole list of especially like kids who are not sleeping. So we wanna, and I'm glad you brought that up, so I'll be curious to yeah, it's intense for them, and I don't think it's on our school district that it's coming from, it's coming from the college. So how we best serve them to be prepared for that, I think it's the best way to do that. Obviously not for you guys, so that. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. If
Feel free to
you
go
feel
home.
free to stay, or you
Or
can
we're gonna talk
go.
about attendance, which might
We
be
are
right
talking
up
about
your alley.
attendance. So
I'm in curriculum, not attendance.
last we spoke, new legislation came out, and it spoke about an update to the attendance policy that we would need to make. Some of the significant changes include things like when students are out on field trips, they would be marked as full attendance.
Yeah.
So I did put it up here on the screen. Thank you again both so much for
Thank
joining.
you.
Appreciate it.
Good night.
So they're
Good
they're
night.
present at their assigned school and or participate in activities sponsored by the school. So a field trip, for example, where in the past that was marked differently. And participating in statutorily authorized remote learning is also approved for attendance. In all of these for at least half of the instructional day.
This was the statute.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, this is legislative leave. This is a resolution put in place. So a student is considered to be in attendance, if present at his or her assigned school, in activities sponsored by the school, such as a field trip, for at least half of the regular school day. Students serving an out-of-school suspension or expulsion are reported as absent, except for each day that the student receives alternative educational programming for at least half of the instructional school day. And down there is actually where you can see when it was voted on. And
Can I ask, if a student is out of school suspension though, that is coded on their report as a absent but OSS though, right?
yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
So if they are just getting tutoring, homebound tutoring, they would still be marked absent because that's not half the day.
Correct. It's typically not half the day, and it would either fall under a homebound scenario that would be due to a medical reason, or it could be expulsion, right? Those are the other reasons why a student would be out, in which they're expelled, it would be an absence.
And that was approved by a vote of 9.
Oh, that's just how the legislation was
Okay,
approved.
so the legislation approved that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
all we're doing really is bringing this to the board, to say this is legislation, there's really not it's what we have to do because the state says we have to do it. And then,
So I'm recommending taking the language from the legislation
Yeah.
and making sure that it meets the same exact, aligns exactly to our attendance policy, so that any a policy language that would be contrary to this
Yes.
would be updated, because that would be out of statutory requirement.
At this time, do we have a lot of confidence with them?
No, the field trip,
The field
things like
I thought
field
that was
trip,
the only stipulation.
and they go on some other, I guess they're all kind of field trips, but sometimes they'll do other excursions, and DECA will go with things like that.
so like if they left early because they had a sports thing and they had to leave at 1, they would be marked as present, even though they're absent from the class.
Correct.
They're half the day.
Those are that's really the one area where this was most significantly impacting.
Yeah.
That works for us.
All right. Just get back to
That
the
we can do like, you know,
agenda.
something we can
That
tell
was
you about.
quick.
We're very quick when we're not, it's the state tells us we have to do it.
Well, this next
Well,
one
it's not one of the-
is actually not, there isn't much wiggle room either.
Yeah.
This is also a definite statutory requirement. We don't have a choice with this.
Did we start looking at
We
this?
did.
Yeah, we
She
did.
started saying, she went, oh. you want this?
Yeah.
Take it, and then you were like, actually, no, there's comments.
Right, you weren't too aware of it, I think, at the time, but, so we too, learned it about a little late, and, but any teacher is allowed to request a behavior intervention meeting with the school's intervention team for any student whose behavior has caused a serious disruption, to other students, instruction, or self-harm or physical harm to the teacher, another student, or teacher's classroom. So the current practice sometimes might be maybe there's just an intervention between the principal and the student, or assistant principal and the student, maybe a counselor, a social worker, a school psychologist, teacher student. This would allow a teacher, though, to go beyond that, to say that I would like to have a meeting with the intervention team and be able to get immediate opportunity to discuss the concerns, some of the data that goes along with it, and be able to help put an intervention in place sooner than later. And the goal always is so that the student can be more successful and the teacher can be more successful, right? We want both to be able to be successful. Yes,
I like my discrepancy.
yes.
What is a serious disruption constitute?
So,
Because that's up
That-
to discretions.
yeah, that
Examples
becomes
of
discretionary and
Do
is,
we have any examples? of
yeah,
that?
oftentimes it's spelled out actually in the handbooks.
Yeah. I wanted to
So,
just know.
But also with that, I'm gonna say serious disruption.
Yeah.
So teachers are human.
Yeah.
And so what I feel is a serious disruption, I assure
Right.
you, is vastly different
Than-
than what
yeah,
most
than
teachers
the
do. I'm like, oh,
exception.
they're hanging because you're like, cool, it's like learning, right?
right.
But if that serious disruption is causing a disruption to your learning style, there is some subjectivity to that, right? So then you call, like in our school, it's called the SST, you call
Yeah.
that group together.
Yeah.
And you say, listen, like, I need my kids to sit with their hands folded, and when they're not, it's a disruption, what can I do? And then the SST can be like, well, that's unrealistic, but, so I do think there needs to be some.
With data, I think in the
some levels of
implementation
that.
process is that.
But can I
Yeah,
respond to
guess-
that, or you
yeah,
go first?
Yeah, I
then?
just wanna say too, in terms of that too, is this a one-off act or is this
It
have to
can
show
be a
repeated,
one-off.
repeated action, right?
Could
Like-
be if that's so serious, right?
Okay.
That
Like the
just-
self-harm or,
Right,
or the classroom harm, even if it's just one time that there's an physical altercation, that's enough to cause the teacher concern to call this meeting.
I just wanna make sure, it doesn't have to be necessarily, in my opinion, outlined a specific policy, but outlined in the.
regulations.
Just being able to say, yeah, in the like, but, obviously it's just saying you're allowed to request it, not required to request it, so that's a good,
Mhm.
you know, distinguisher. I just wanna make sure that when that's implemented, teachers know that they have that discretion and maybe examples of what that discretion can look like for different
Mhm.
settings,
Mhm.
right? That,
Yeah, I think that will be important to give some examples.
outside in recess, when
Mhm.
someone's screaming, if
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
Competition for this law, because Tess got
Yeah.
involved in it, is some teachers were asserting that they were not allowed to request these.
Yes.
I see.
Even when their students were quite seriously disruptive, so legislators felt compelled to set aside a law like this. Here in Newington, we do have some structures that teachers
We do.
can get to very promptly.
And to illuminate your point of perspective earlier about individuals,
Eliminating my perspective?
what?
You're eliminating
I'm
my.
illuminating it.
Oh, illuminating.
Not illuminating, illuminating.
Shining a light on.
Shining a light on it. That people have varied tolerances, right? To that point, if it's just maybe me as the principal working with you and the student, I might be a very low threshold principal, and it's okay, they can do that, and and so to your point about implementation or what's serious, what's not, when you gather a team together, then you have the benefit of having all voices there and other teachers involved, other practitioners, experts who can provide some context around that and support the educator to say, maybe the folding of hands is a little much, but we can do this, and that would be good.
Right, because this really doesn't go to the next steps. This is just that the teacher can call a meeting.
Correct.
And what happens after that, that's a different kind of
Yes.
avenues, but this is just the call for a meeting.
Correct.
Because there were teachers, I'm sure in other districts who felt like they were not able to, or
Yeah.
their call for a meeting was not heard.
Mhm.
And
That's
just
exactly
to the
it.
last point, like you emphasize that that wasn't the case in Newington. But in terms of the
Anyway,
I don't anticipate this would, and obviously you don't have to, so I just want to make sure too. What?
Is she there? Because Dana's not. muted.
Someone might be unmuted and,
Um,
if you could please mute your microphone.
it doesn't make an undue burden on it. Like that kind of stuff, like you don't anticipate that.
Correct, we do
That
now.
also, then this policy might go into like budget and stuff. Like
Yes.
that.
Right.
No,
I think
I
this
don't anticipate that, I just want to.
this is already done in Newington
Yeah.
and
It's a state mandate. so
Right,
even
no,
if-
I just wanted to make sure, like, as we explain the
We could
policy,
call it another unfunded state mandate, but I think.
I don't think so. We're okay.
we're already anticipating. I think a lot of, obviously, in the way. Correct.
Yeah. I think if anything, it continues to put more, validation to what we kind of do, as well as probably more formalization in some ways too. So I think it's a benefit. I'm not concerned at all about its impact on resources. If anything, it'll probably continue to help us be proactive when situations happen. And so, yeah, I'm not concerned about that.
So we would just, that's a state and we're just gonna, so we'll bring that to the board
Correct.
on December 16th
Mhm.
with my cookies. And, I thought it was the 16th.
14.
I believe it's the 14th, yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's a clarification. So on December
Yeah,
14th, we'll bring these and we will bring the other policies that we had from the last board meeting that we didn't have time to talk about.
Correct.
And the board can all have discussions about it. And we will all hear everyone's point of view on them. And then we will vote on it in our January.
That sounds.
Excellent, thank you.
Right, is there any other discussion before we open this back up to public participation?
I have none.
Public participation, people at home, people here, Richard?
We have a member from the public coming up first, and then those who are online, we will call right after. Okay? Thank you so much for your patience.
Richard De Silva, Connecticut Avenue. I'd like to touch on the graded system. One of the things about the grading system is so that students know what they're good at, not to boost their self-esteem. If teachers were concerned about boosting my self-esteem, I would be in a career field that I would not be very good at. So it's the parents, the teachers, and general members of the community that have failed students by making them think that it's all about getting the highest grade. We should be teaching the children the proper way or the proper use of grades, not just to get the highest. I'd like to go back to what I said earlier about the anonymous policy and urge the board to do not enact that policy. Parents already think that you're trying to silence them and that you implement reprisal against them and their children for speaking out. If you do that, you will just confirm their suspicions. In addition to that, what's next? You're going to start limiting who gets to speak based on certain prerequisites that are going to be arbitrary. I think those are two valid points. And lastly, for Ms. Droz, it seems like a lot of your policies are influenced by your personal experiences. Your grading policy earlier, you started off by saying, my son felt this. And your dress code policy was, back in high school, this was how I felt. Your job is for the well-being of children now, not to address your personal grievances back from high school, college, or whatever. That is just a continuous trend I'm seeing with Ms. Rose on her policies. They all seem to address previous grievances and not the current state that would actually help children right here, right now, in this day and age. And please keep the grading system, educate children on the proper use of the grading system, and encourage them to get good grades. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. I have a few hands up. I believe Mrs. Tolosano. If you would please go next. You can unmute yourself, please.
Perfect. Thank you. My name is Melissa Tolosano, and I'm on 8th Street. As a parent, a taxpayer, a voter who participates in public public officials, I think it's wrong that parents aren't going to be able to vocalize concerns with policies and procedures concerning their child's education at Board of Ed meetings. A written correspondence comes across very differently than communicating in person. You're elected officials, and part of your job is to hear comments on policies you create that affect our children. Why shouldn't a parent play a role in that? Dr. Brummett's an appointed official who can comment on policy, but she cannot vote. How should parental concerns be filtered through her and then deemed important enough to be spoken about at board meetings? Kind of similar to the buses and the pre-K kids riding with older kids or kindergarten kids riding with older siblings. How is that working for the town of Newington and equally representing students? You talk so much about equity among students and how as a parent of a student in Newington Public Schools, I can no longer be a voice for my child. Why not change the etiquette allowed at Board of Ed meetings and create a policy for that so that it's not aggressive, it's professional? I think it's really alarming that changing this policy, and in my opinion, I really don't think it's constitutional. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
We don't normally respond to public participation,
Correct.
but I don't understand what policy she's referring to. That we're saying that people can't come to our board meetings and talk about policy. So I just want to clarify. Can you clarify what policy you're referring to?
I was just, I kind of, that's what I assumed based off of what was written in the PDF that we weren't allowed. I thought the chains of command that it would go through would have to be written first and not.
That is correct. That was given at the board meeting, Danielle.
That's library.
That's literally, that's only for library text selection.
Yeah, so that's library and text selection. So I just want to make sure that there's not something in our policy that, I mean, obviously we'll bring it up at discussion at board meetings and I appreciate that, but I just want to make sure that I understand which specific policy that is in, and so we can address it.
I don't have the number and I don't have the paper in
It's
front of me.
under
It's in a PDF.
So could you do me a favor, Ms. Tolosano? If you get it, if you could email me the policy number, just because I will bring that up at our board meeting, because I don't remember ever having a conversation, nor is that anything that anyone on this policy has ever discussed that we don't want people to come and talk to us.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'll follow up with you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's see. Ms. Yiser?
Hi, I'm Sarah Yiser. I'm Sarah Yiser, and I'm from East Robbins Avenue. So this is also about parent participation at Board of Education meetings in regards to public complaint. So with all respect to Dr. Brummett, the Board of Education is separate from the superintendent. So yes, you guys work together, but you're still separate. So the Board of Education are beholden to the taxpayer and our elected officials that control the budget. So by not fielding public complaints and putting it directly to the superintendent, certain issues can be swept under the rug. The reason for the Board of Education to field questions or complaints from parents is to bring it into the public domain issues that are occurring in the school system and to create a public record. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe Ms. Yap is next.
Hi, yes. So I'm referring to policy NPS 1312, community relations, public complaints, just to address Danielle. It was given in the board packet. Let me read this. It says, the board will not consider or act upon any complaints that have not been explored by the appropriate level or complaints for which specific resolution procedures have been established that do not include board review. If the board decides to hear the complaint, the board shall make the decision, yada, yada, yada. Part of it, and this is NPS 1312 under public complaints. One of my biggest things, and I'm going to jump around, is we talk about equity. And equity, you know, is something that we talk about nonstop. Quality of being fair and impartial. It is being fair and impartial to not let the Board of Ed, which was elected by the town, not by anyone, not the board chair, not the superintendent. It says, since individual board members have no authority to resolve complaints other than by formal board actions, board members shall refer persons making complaints about schools to the most immediate level at which the problems can be resolved and necessary through lines of organizations to the superintendent of schools. The board expects that the administration will develop a procedure for receiving complaints courteously, and it will take steps to make proper reply to this complaint. Follow-up shall be in the form of written memorandum to the board members. So we keep talking about equity. I keep hearing that a lot. Mr. Farisi, you talk about it, and I didn't skim through this. And it concerns me that you guys are looking at this, but you're passing these policies. This was given to the Board of Ed last meeting, and this was highlighted in yellow in our board packet, sent to us by Sophie and and whoever else sent it. It's very concerning that this is the policy committee and they don't know what's going on in the policies. Now, I know it's a lot, but it's there. Secondly, we keep talking about, being fair and partial. I'm a minority woman in a town that's populated mostly white. Actually, it's 74% white, if you look it up according to the new census data. And I like being a voice for my child and the children in the community. The population in this town of minorities like me is 3.72% as of 2021. I want to be a voice for our children. I want to be a voice for our child. And we keep talking about these things. Another thing is mental health. Our student reps advocated literally into tears about an additional mental health day. You have all these policies and procedures, yet no one has addressed the fact that they've asked. And I've had children come to my home and say, we don't have enough mental health days. These children are asking you for a policy that allows them an additional mental health days. You talk about children who essentially, want good grades and things like that. But these children that are pushed, and our student reps talked about this with all these AP classes, don't have enough mental health days. So maybe that's a policy we should be focusing on and focusing on that soon, saying that midterms are coming up, etc. And these kids need our help. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yap.
Okay, again, I know we're not supposed to respond to public participation. Can I just, it's my committee, so I'm going to. So when I questioned the, Mrs. Talisano, I was questioning where in policy 1312, it said parents weren't allowed to come to board meetings. So that's what I was questioning. So I don't need, I understand what the policy says. I don't see in that policy about not coming to board meetings. That's all. So go ahead, Mr. Gracie, next person.
Looks like Mr. Lavier.
Yes, thanks. Again, I just want to, well, first I want to just echo one thing that Ms. Drost said, and I thought that it was quite good, quite apt. What does severe disruption mean? In the legal world, that could be considered vague and ambiguous. So, I mean, before that policy does get brought to the board, I think that maybe revision of those words would be appropriate. To get, giving examples is perfectly fine, but the language of the policy itself being open for interpretation is not a good thing. So I do appreciate Ms. Dro's questioning of that. Thank you. Secondly, I do want to again echo that my statements from earlier. I think that the policy that's being proposed that would circumvent a voter's, a parent's ability to come to a board member to seek resolution for a concern is wildly inappropriate. I do think that the policy committee did not really do the people in Newington a service by putting that through to the board. Again, it's putting the superintendent and relevant administration who are unelected in the position to handle everything when we're supposed to be here to handle things as well. And the basic language of it saying a board member has no authority why would the policy committee want to say the board has no authority? What are you here for? Thanks.
Yeah. Can I just respond to that real quick?
I think you'll need to be loud.
Yeah,
Well, first, it was Jeff Weaver who pointed out the ambiguity. It was not me.
thank you.
I know it's hard because we are not.
It's
we are not. So.
I would just say that it is correct that no individual board member has any authority to take board action because we are a board of education and we as a board have authority to take action on matters. But as stated in our bylaws, we only concern ourselves with broad questions of policy, not with administrative details. We are here to instruct policy, which then the administration needs to do that. That's not us limiting our factors. So I'm just going to put that out there.
And I would also recommend, I know you're acting as a member of the public, Mr. Lavier. But I do want to state that, we are discussing this on October 14th, we're going backwards, December 14th. So, I welcome, that would be a time where if you had revisions that you brought them so that we can talk about it as a board.
And
And
then
so
bring
we're
it
just
back
the first step. So bring it to the board and say, I think it should be worded in this way. And I think it would be a better springboard and more productive for us to make those changes.
Thank you, and I apologize, Jessica, for giving Danielle a credit. But, thank you. I'll look into doing that. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lavieri. I think our last participant is Mrs. Havens.
There we go. Now I couldn't unmute myself. I'm unmuted.
All right.
Okay. I think the policy that Melissa brought up, I think you just need to change your wording. Like, even if you just add, parents are always welcome to express their concerns at a board meeting, but need to keep in mind that the board members are limited. And then say the rest that you have there. Because reading it, it does make it appears that you don't want to deal with us. And you just want us to send little letters and hope we forget all about it. So I think you just need to change the wording on that. And I think Richard bringing stuff up now in a policy meeting is a good place to bring it up, because then you can change it before you even bring it to the board. But anyways, that's my 2 cents, and bye.
Thank you.
Beth wants to.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
It's
just,
Oh,
it's
sorry.
just,
I just think that,
Right here.
sorry.
I don't know where to look.
I'm like looking everywhere. Sorry. Thank you, Dana. I think that's a really, actually, I like what you said. I was like kind of on the same wavelength that, perhaps it's being interpreted differently than it was intended when written.
Mhm.
And I certainly do not want, and I know there's only some of you online right now, and maybe people can watch this, but loud and clear from the rooftop, every parent who has a child in Newington Public Schools, you're a member of the team. You have a seat at the table in a different way. And that is an important seat, as though my little ones are little, when they are of school age, if I feel the need, I'm happy that I have the opportunity to come and sit at the table and to voice my opinion. And I would never want that right to be ever taken away from a parent. I think it's essential. Like I said, we are a member of the team, but I know in confidence that the thought behind this was not that. So perhaps we do need to just look at perhaps look at parts of it so it comes off a little differently, because that is not the intent. And I, as a parent, and others as parents, as teachers, and just members of this community, I speak for, I think all of us would never want to sign off on something that would ever take away that share and take away that voice from parents. You're part of the biggest part of the puzzle that we need to pull together.
And I want to just add to that, Ms. Havens, that the way that the policy works, and it's the same with curriculum, right, is we come forward with like, this is our beginnings, right? And then in a ideal world is we all meet as a board and we change it, right? Because there's just 3 of us here and Steve. But right, it's only 3 board members here, and we have Dr. Brumman here, but it's 3 of us here. So it's great feedback, and so that feedback is where we have that board discussion amongst everyone, where we make the changes. So and sometimes there's so many changes that the whole board comes to us with, that we come back and we say, okay, we need to table this and we need to bring it back and take this and then actually rewrite the whole thing. So it's just the protocol of how things are done. I agree that in the policy is where we begin it, but by no means are we that final voice. So I think that you guys got great ideas forward. So now we bring it to the board. The board does it, and then if we aren't ready to at that meeting vote on it, we do come back. So I hope that makes sense.
I just wanted to know.
I
I just wanted to know to the Board of Education, the first sentence of the policy is the Board of Education welcomes comments and suggestions for improvement from the citizens whom it serves. So to me, like the sentiment of this is very much that it literally says we welcome the comments.
Right, but we need to change it a little bit.
But I think for our perspective, so everyone understands where the policy was. I know a lot of the public wasn't at the last meeting. We always have these, but we really did go into this with the mindset that as we get more participation, we want to be able to refer people to the right things. And as board members, it's not in our scope of work to solve every problem, but to be advocates and refer to right parties in the administrative function of our schools. So honestly, to me, this policy was more of an educational piece more than anything else, but I can understand without any of the context of our prior discussions on this that there could be at first some consternation around that.
And then turn it back over to public participation, and we're not going to respond anymore because we're not supposed to. But
Yeah,
I did want to
I
did want to clarify those were clarifiable comments. So go ahead, Dina, and then I think Ms. Yap has her hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I don't think we're supposed to be doing back and forth either. But Beth, you did say, we welcome every parent right to speak at the meeting, but make sure because even though my kids are now graduated, I'm still going to be involved because, well, I really care about kids, and you also take almost 80% of my tax dollars. So, make sure you do a good job.
Ms. Yap.
Thank you.
So I wanted to say thank you to Beth for pointing that out. And I do know that, we both have younger children and, we stay involved. But I do think that wording that you mentioned, that parents are always welcome, it should be, added there. And I don't think that should be I think that was a really great suggestion. So I just wanted to echo off what Dana was saying. I thought, thank you for that. I do appreciate that. And everyone else who also mentioned it. I don't want to leave everybody out. I can't really see everyone. So I just hear like women talking, sorry, the way the computer is. So sorry. Like right now I'm just looking at somebody's sweatshirt, but okay. So hi. So yeah, so thank you for that, because even as a board member, a current board member, reading these things where it's saying to me, that everything should have to go through, signed, the accusations are in writing, signed by the party making the complaint and presented to the board through the superintendent. I mean, I don't want parents to feel like, okay, I elected you, and I don't have and my voice is taken. So the fact that you said that and brought that up, that makes me feel a lot more comfortable. And I will also reiterate that I think we should make it a policy to add another mental health day, because we keep getting this and we haven't addressed it yet. But thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to add, it is the first sentence in the policy that we say we welcome comments and suggestions.
I know, but the rest of it doesn't make it sound like you
we'll
welcome the following.
Board meeting. So, all right. Is there any other public participation? All right.
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay, motion to adjourn. Second.
Adjournment at 8:12 p.m. Okay, 8:10. I was going by that.
8:10.
It's 8:10.
Yeah.
Really fast. So we'll talk about it.
Thank you all.
Take care of it.
Have a good evening.
It really boils down to the better way.
I know.
I wonder what this quoting us.
It's like last month, it's that thing, so it's like her. Oh, yeah. I'm just gonna put that.
Yeah. We communicated to CIs with that.
Wait,